Well, basically, the death of Stalin is based on a lot of true incidents, really, all compressed into a timeline that takes place around about the time Stalin falls ill and dies. And then not only are there arrangements put in place for the massive funeral, biggest funeral in the Soviet Union, but the power struggle that goes on behind the scenes. Who is going to replace Stalin? Now, Stalin was a great terrorizer. He held the Soviet Union in the palm of his hand, and his chief administrator of terror and punishment was Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the security forces. So is he going to take over? On the other hand, there's Nikita Khrushchev, a rather bumptious and bumbling junior in this whole arrangement, who actually wants to become the reformer and try and take the terror away and try and ease things. But both of them are convinced that the other is out to get him. So it's a kind of slightly Mexican standoff, really, when Stalin is dead. But it's based on true instance. Stalin falls over in his dacha outside Moscow, has a stroke, but he tells his guards that he never ever wants to be disturbed. So when the guards hear him fall over, they don't know what to do, and they don't want to be shot, so they don't go in. So he's left lying on the floor in his office for hours, I think really more or less the whole night and into the next day. Then the committee arrive, Lavrentiy Beria and the rest of the committee, but it takes them a while to decide to call a doctor. First of all, because Stalin had a lot of key doctors rounded up and imprisoned because he was convinced they were going to poison him. So do they call one of those, or do they call a decrepit, not so good doctor in? So there's this debate, almost like a committee meeting takes place first before they decide which doctors to get in. And even Khrushchev writes about it in his memoirs, as does Stalin's daughter, Svetlana, that there was a respirator there, but they didn't use it because it was American. So there's this whole, even as Stalin is dead and dying, he's still terrorizing everybody. They're too scared to do the wrong thing. So as a result, they do nothing. So that's the start, and then the great power struggle as to who is going to take over. Well, actually, I was approached by a production company, Quad, who have done great French movies in the past, and they approached me. They had the rights to the graphic novel, and they got in touch with me and they said, look, we want to make this into a film. We think you should do it. And I said, fine. I'm in the middle of shooting Veep. I'm in America. And they said, we'll wait. So I thought, okay, well, I better read this. And I was instantly captivated by it. It has a great opening, again, based on a true story. It's a concert in Moscow. Mozart piano concerto is being played, going out live on Radio Moscow. The head of Radio Moscow gets a phone call. It's Stalin saying, I'm listening to this at home. I'd love a recording. Puts the phone down. Head of Radio Moscow turns to his engineer and says, are we recording this? And the engineer says, no, it's going out live. He thinks, oh my God. And so he runs out into the audience and shouts for the doors to be locked, everyone to stay exactly where they are. They're going to do it again. This time they're going to do it again and record it for Stalin. At which point the conductor, who's so nervous, he actually faints, knocks his head out as he falls, knocks himself unconscious. So now they have to find another conductor. So they scour Moscow for another conductor, and they haul one in his pajamas and dressing gown where he conducts it. And that's all true. That's absolutely true. And I thought that was such a great opening. And also, I had been thinking at the time of doing something about dictators, you know, autocrats, totalitarianism. How can people, just by dint of their personality, how can they terrorize a whole nation? So I'd been reading about Chairman Mao and, you know, having a little look at Putin as well. Trump wasn't even on the horizon as we were preparing this. But I just thought that the coincidence of this book arriving and it chiming with what I wanted to do and being captivated by the story in the graphic novel, the way it was laid out, I knew instantly I wanted to do it. I could see how to make it. I knew where it would be funny and where it would be horrific and where it would be tense and where it would be farcical. And a lot of that is in the original as well. And a lot of the original is based on true farce that actually happened at the time of Stalin's death. What I wanted to do with the film, turning the graphic novel into a screenplay and then a film, is first of all play a little bit with the timeline, because in the book it actually takes over several chapters that go forward several months in time. So there's a jump after the funeral, there's a jump about 3 or 4 months before we then go into a set of committee meetings which determine who's going to succeed Stalin. And though that works linearly as you're reading the graphic novel, I didn't think it made for a movie, in that time jump actually took a lot of the momentum out of the action. So what I did was I sort of tried to telescope everything into the same timeline. So actually the struggle for who's going to take over happens at the same time as they are planning and carrying out the funeral. And in fact, we have the climax of the film, which is the actual power struggle, the final coup, takes place during the funeral. Khrushchev and Beria are the two protagonists, really. They're the two kind of personalities clashing. Beria in the graphic novels are much more macabre, much more he's the fascinating one. In the film, we have to make Khrushchev equally as important and give him as, make him a bit more three-dimensional, especially if you've got a great actor like Steve Buscemi playing him. So you have to make it really a clash of equals. And then you've got the rest of the Politburo, and they have to come a bit more to the foreground, especially once you start casting them and actually realizing that, you've got nearly 90 minutes, 100 minutes to play with here. So the dialogue has to be much more flowing. There's lesser reliance on just the image, the visual set piece, although there are quite a few that I've tried to copy in the film and replicate. But the dialogue is, and I suppose my background is writing, and the dialogue for me is important for the characters. So that's where a lot of the hard work went on. First of all, that's restructuring it. But fundamentally, all the beats that are in the graphic novel, I wanted to follow in. I could just see it was a perfect story. So I tried to hold on to that, and I tried to hold on to the tone of the humour and the grimness as well. I mean, what the graphic novel does, and which I really liked, was not only do you see these thugs battle it out within the Kremlin, but you actually see scenes all across Russia, how their decisions are actually impacting on real lives, innocent lives all across the Soviet Union. And that's something we put in the film as well. We made sure that we had scenes, just little momentary scenes, little fragments that showed you people in the gulags, people being rounded up, informers, people being released, and then the crowd disturbances outside the funeral, which and again, this happened in real life. 1,500 people died in those disturbances. And I think the book and the film, I think, wanted to respect that in a way and not play with that kind of reality. As we were doing the screenplay, I immediately thought of Simon Russell Beale for Beria. I've seen Simon on stage, and he has got a powerful personality, but he's also naturally funny as well. For a serious classically trained actor and a theatrical actor, actually he's got a great funny bone, but he's got that presence. And I just thought, and he, I could see the similarity in the look with him and Beria. We shot a scene where Simon as Beria is doing his speech in Red Square, and we found a still shot of the actual footage of Beria doing the speech, and we matched them, and they're an uncanny resemblance. The size, the hat, the glasses, everything is just uncanny. So I had Simon in mind, and I spoke to him. I also had Michael Palin in mind for Molotov. Molotov, we've made this purist, as it were, communist purist, ideologue, who wants to do everything absolutely by the book. If it means seeing his wife go off and get shot, then that's what it means. If it means, as turns out, that his wife hasn't been shot and is returned to him, he has to accept that. Struggling with how he copes with Stalin dying and the party, and I saw Michael as someone who could play that really well, which he does in the film. And then this poor Malenkov, who takes over from Stalin, and is way, way, way out of his depth. I had Jeffrey Tambor in mind as someone who has that nobility about his look, but can play that fragility and that paranoia that he's not doing as well as he thinks he should be in mind for that.